A sequel to Chicken Run. I'm in. Chicken Run, Dawn of the Nugget. Whew, that was a mistake, that was hot. So Chicken Run, Dawn of the Nugget is a sequel to Chicken Run, which came out in the year 2000 from Aardman Studios. Like I said, they're the makers of Wallace and Gromit, Flushed Away. This movie's a Netflix exclusive, and it takes place sometime after the events of the first movie. The chickens, having escaped from their grim fates at the farm, they're now living in paradise, and Ginger and Rocky have a kid, a daughter named Molly. She wants to explore the world, but Ginger's like, no, there's danger out there. And so Molly goes behind her back, and sure enough, she does get captured and taken to a new facility where Mrs. Tweety, out for revenge, has created a new delicacy: chicken nuggets. And so our crew now has to break into this facility to rescue everybody. Alright, if you remember, the original Chicken Run was a childhood movie of mine, but it's one I hadn't really watched since I was a kid. I reviewed it earlier this year, and I thought it still held up. It's surprisingly great. It's funny, it's witty, clever, great score too. And now 23 years later, we finally have a sequel, and I don't think it's as good as the first one. I mean, it's not bad, it's just, it's fine. It's a functional kids movie. And actually, most of the characters were recast, not all of them, but most of them. Ginger now voiced by Thandie Newton. Rocky, the Lone Free Ranger, is now voiced by Zachary Levi, which is so funny. Like, right when his first line of dialogue came up, I instantly recognized that voice. I was like, yep, that is Flynn Rider. Just Zach Levi's voice is so unmistakable to me, because I love that dude. And he does have some pretty funny moments in this movie. In fact, he probably had the funniest moments. And as much as he and Ginger are as much in focus now as they were in the first movie, I'd say this movie focuses just as much on their kid, Molly, voiced by Bella Ramsey, as it does on her parents. And Molly's a pretty good character. She is kind of that archetype of, you know, the young kid who just wants to explore and be brave, kind of like Nemo. Which then the similarities actually go even further, because her mother is really overprotective of her, like Marlin, because she's seen the dangers out there in the world. She just wants to protect her kid. And then the kid gets taken and the parent has to go rescue them. Wow, this is a lot like Finding Nemo. But that's beside the point. I like Molly as a character, that's my point. And while she's out on her own, she makes a friend named Frizzle, which I will say, I feel like I'm gonna sound douchey saying this, but her accent was so thick, it was pretty hard for me to understand what she was saying without subtitles. I mean, Aardman Studios, they're a British studio, you know? And so this cast is mostly British, but Frizzle's accent was so thick, I was like, wait, huh? I don't know, maybe that's just a problem with me. And I definitely did like her as a character. She's fun and spunky and all that. And also, yeah, you heard me right, Mrs. Tweety is back. Once again, voiced by Miranda Richardson. And once again, she completely crushes it. I love Mrs. Tweety as a villain, because she's really funny. Just watching this movie as an adult who's in his late 20s, who saw Chicken Run when he was a kid, I just find it really funny to think about Mrs. Tweety and what her life is really like. You know what caused her to be the way she is? In this movie, she's moved on to a new husband. Yeah, Mr. Tweety is not in this movie at all. She's got someone new that she slaps around. And you just have to wonder why. Or at least that's where my mind goes. Don't know the reason for that either. You wanna know what I liked about this movie? Is the fact that it brought Ginger and Rocky's kid to the forefront, and it does focus on the kid as much as it does on Ginger and Rocky. In that, this is gonna sound really strange, but as I was watching it, it reminded me of Avatar: The Way of Water. I know, weird, but bear with me, because it does the same thing, really. It's been a while since the first movie was released, almost twice as long for Chicken Run, and so there is naturally gonna be a bit of a time jump. And so let's make this sequel a generational story, bringing the new kids into it, but still keeping our main characters from the first installment. This movie does a really good job at balancing the two story arcs. You care just as much about Molly and Frizzle as you do about Ginger and Rocky and the rest of the crew. Babs, Mac, Bunty. Although Fowler, who's one of the funniest characters from the first movie, I felt was kind of wasted in this one. I mean, he's now voiced by David Bradley. You know him as Filch from Harry Potter or Walder Frey from Game of Thrones. I thought that was perfect casting, but he doesn't really do much in this movie. Kind of a waste. And yeah, that bummed me out. But I do want to give all sorts of props to the animation in this movie. I mean, in a world where animated movies these days have been branching out and trying new things, like Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem, Nimona, they've been doing new things other than your standard 3D animation. Hell, even Wish. But it's always nice to come back to your classic stop-motion animation, you know? That predates all the computer 3D animation. I'm just such a huge fan of this art because it does take all that time and devotion to move a character a fraction of an inch, take a picture, and then move them again a fraction of an inch and take another picture repeatedly for so long, but it's absolutely worth it to see the final product. Plus, these characters look absolutely no different than they did in the first movie. It's like no time has passed at all. No, they look and feel and move exactly the same. It's almost like you would think this movie came out a year or two after the first one. That's really cool. But then again, maybe that's just the nostalgia in me talking. I don't know. Cause really, other than that, not a whole lot about this movie impressed me. I mean, again, it's not bad, but nothing was really special about it either, you know? Again, it's a standard kids movie and it's functional in that sense. It's fine. I never really laughed out loud at any of the funny moments. I mean, yeah, sure, there were a couple of funny jokes where I was like, yeah, that was pretty clever. Well done, good writing there. But they were few and far between. Whereas the first movie, if I remember correctly, had a lot more funny moments that did have me laughing out loud. So that is a step down that this movie has from the first one. And I mean, you know, it's your standard rescue/prison break kids movie. There were definitely a couple of moments in this movie that certainly reminded me of Toy Story 3. And also the beginning of Toy Story 2 at a couple of points. You'll know it when you see it. And I thought to myself, maybe this movie would have been more fun if I had seen it in a movie theater. Well, really, cause in my opinion, any movie is more fun in a theater. So yeah. Although this movie's score is great, and the first movie score was written by John Powell and Harry Gregson Williams. Harry Gregson Williams came back to score the sequel by himself. And it's great, it brings back that same theme that I love from the first one. Yeah, that fanfare that sounds like a Western, I love that theme, it's great. It's all heroic and triumphant, really works for that Aardman kids movie vibe. In the end, Chicken Run Dawn of the Nugget is your standard functional kids movie. That's really what I can say about it. If you have young kids, you can put this movie on to keep them entertained for an hour and a half, while you, the parent, are off doing something else. But if you do want to watch this with your kid, then you won't be irritated by it, but you won't be super invested either. Whereas in the first one, you would be. The animation is great, the characters are good, I like that it focuses just as much on the kid as it does on the parents. That's a pretty good way to bring kids and parents who are watching this movie together. And that ain't a bad thing. I'd say if you like the first movie, then check the sequel out. If you're not super attached to the first one, then you can skip out on this if you want. You're not really missing a whole lot. Bottom line, Chicken Run Dawn of the Nugget, you could take it or leave it. So, Chicken Run Dawn of the Nugget. Have you watched it yet? What are your thoughts on it? And what's your favorite Aardman movie of all time? Whatever you think, go ahead and leave a comment. And of course, thank you for subscribing. Peace! Hot. Oh, fuck.